Hey sis. Today I want to talk about why people that's not honest, why it just drains you so much. Just just make up stuff for no reason. Like they just don't even have a reason. Just be dishonest just because. And I think one of the most mentally exhausting experiences is like trying to make people that are dishonest or emotionally inconsistent um make logical sense. People that just tell stories for no reason. They're just dishonest. We can't we can't make sense of it, or you can't make sense of it because it doesn't make sense, right? Because emotionally aware or emotionally intelligent people, they often notice stuff like the shift in the stories, the little changes. Like today was this day, tomorrow was that day, next week it's a whole nother day. We also notice like the inconsistencies. You said you was here at this time, but then it turned into that time and that time. Also, you notice the emotional inconsistencies or incongruences. Like it doesn't make sense, because we're like make it make sense because it's not making sense. And also the patterns. And that's the thing. It's like you don't always trust their words. We're gonna look at the patterns, okay? And so all of this takes place when people are emotionally mature and emotionally intelligent and you catch on. If you're like that, all of these things happen. You already start seeing the shifting stories, the inconsistencies, the emotionally jumping from here to there, all the patterns. You see all of that way before you even say something. You didn't already saw it. You're just now talking about it because you didn't did your research, and you come to the conclusion that it's a flat out both-faced story. So now you're ready to present what you have. And so if that's you, and you're that type of person that picks up on things, or you've been around people who just make up stuff for no reason and it's very exhausting to you, this message is for you. So let's talk about it. But first, let me introduce myself. My name's Melinda. I'm a registered nurse, life coach, and a mentor. And on our channel, we focus on faith, healing, and emotional wellness. Okay, at any time, if any parts of this message touches you, make sure you give me a thumbs up to let me know, yes, that was a good message, or yes, I can relate. And then if you feel the vibe and you like the vibe of the channel, feel free to subscribe. I'm a newer channel, so I'm trying to grow our family on YouTube and find our other family members on here, because I'm trying to create a peaceful, trustworthy atmosphere that we all can kind of bond and relate to each other. Okay, but let's get back to this message. So, mental exhaustion that comes from like dishonesty or emotional inconsistent communication is draining. The thing is that because confusing communication, what it does is it affects the nervous system more deeply than people even realize it. Because you're sitting here trying to figure out, you got to kind of unlock all these doors of all this fake stuff that's going on, and you're trying to get to the bottom of the truth. Okay, and so let's talk about what all these inconsistencies and dishonesty, and how it affects the nervous system and all that. Okay, let's just dive right into it, because this is what it could look like. It's like people that are very observant and emotionally intelligent and can catch on to things quickly, they naturally notice things like you pick up on their stories changing, the details shifting around, behavior that contradicts what comes out their mouth. Like they may act this, the behavior shows this, but they're saying this, but it's not matching up. You already pick up on all that. You also pick up on like emotional inconsistencies, the tone changes, because that could tell you a lot about like a person, if they're being honest or not. Because like for example, if you sit there and talk to someone and you say, wait a minute, I thought you said that this would happen on this day, they could start getting loud and getting or stuttering pattern and stuff like that, or the whole tone, the whole energy could change and shift if they're being dishonest. Their body language, like I said, that could change. They could go from being like very open, have a very open conversation, to now they're closed off because they're trying to figure out what they told you the last time or how much they could tell you this time, because they don't want to lead you to what they really did or something like that, or really said. Or they could also, you will also notice stuff like repeated patterns over time, meaning that they consistently are dishonest about different things over time. Okay, not because you're a psychic or anything like that, because I don't do all that. I'm just, faith based and stuff like that. And some people, when you figure them out and you start bringing stuff to their attention, again, it's after you already know that it's a both-faced story or something like that. You already know that just based off of watching the patterns, the shifting behavior, your body language, the inconsistencies in their stories, and then you bring that to their attention. Now they want to say, well, what are you, psychic or something like that, or you been in my phone? No, I just observed the behavior. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist. Like, once you figure it out, like the patterns and stuff like that. And sometimes, you may be sitting back just waiting and watching, and then you present all your stuff that know that they're not being honest about. But then they may get on the fence and say, start saying things like, all that stuff. And next thing you know, they're like, how you know everything, Miss Goody Two Shoe. And then it goes into all that. Okay. But the thing is that you pay attention. That's as simple as that. You just pay attention, and emotionally aware people often stay quiet much longer than people realize. When we start talking, or if you're emotionally intelligent or emotionally aware, I don't like to use that word, but it is such a word that, like, with people, you catch on quick, and you can have those conversations. It's called being emotionally intelligent. But if you're like that, you know you already know what's going on. You stay quiet longer than they think, and then once you finally come out with what you want to say, it's because you've already assessed everything, and you already know that they're not being honest. It's not like you just found out. You've been watching and waiting to the right time to bring it up. Okay. And so the thing is that you stay quieter because, again, you're just analyzing, just paying attention to their patterns and everything else. Because before you finally say something, you didn't already seen the behavior. You didn't observe quietly. You didn't compare their behavior over times. Like, they was like this before, now they're like this. You didn't look for logical explanations. Okay, maybe they wasn't doing that. You give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they was just late, or maybe this was off this time. But then if it happens again and again and again, okay, now this is not a coincidence. You didn't already figure all that out. You didn't already try not to jump to the conclusions, and you also have already mentally gathered all the facts before you even presented it to the person or people. Okay. And so, but let's talk about why this becomes so mentally exhausting, though, because it does get mentally exhausting. But let's talk about why. Why does it get mentally exhausting? Because it starts when, like, you start getting exhausted when the words stop matching what the behavior is showing. They're saying all this stuff, but nothing's adding up. The behavior is not adding up to the words. Also, it creates, like, the thing is that that emotionally healthy conversation, it creates clarity, consistency, honesty, and emotional safety. And that's what you're trying to get to. That's the whole point of bringing it up, because you want to have an emotionally safe environment, okay, and a peaceful environment. But the thing is that, like, dishonest or emotionally incongruent or inconsistent communication, it what it creates is confusion, mental replaying, rumination, thinking about the past and going back to the past of what you did 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that has nothing to do with today. They could hyper analyze things like, you're just doing this because of this, that, or the other. Then they can go into, like, emotional loops. Like, now they're playing it over and over because they got to try to remember what they told you those last 5 times and see if it matched up. You didn't tell them what they told you, because, again, you're just collecting the information. If they told you somebody's name was Kim, then it was Susan, then it was Karen, then it was Jada, then it was Sam. You're collecting all that data, and then they're emotionally looping, trying to remember what they told you at which time. And so now they're getting upset because they can't remember. Because why? Because they weren't honest. Okay. And so also dishonest emotional inconsistency in communication can also lead to like nervous system exhaustion, because you're trying to figure it out over and over and over, and it's just wearing you out. It's too much. It's too much. And so let's talk about though what psychology shows about this. Okay, psychology recognizes that like we we want the consistency, right? Everybody wants to have, honesty and consistency. And so in a safe landing place, we want safety, okay? Meaning like the brain is always gonna try to, come back to like comparing like the behavior, the tone, the energy, the patterns, because we trying to make it make sense. You're really trying to make it make sense, and your brain is constantly trying to compare all these things: the timing, the tone, the patterns, the body language, the emotional consistency, and all of that. So what happens is when somebody repeatedly communicates inconsistent or in dishonest ways, and they're just not telling the truth, what happens is the nervous system starts reacting before the conscious mind fully explains like why something feels off. Your body and your nervous system knows it's off already. It knows something's going on, but your mind is trying to figure it out. So like your nervous system is ahead of your mind, okay? And that's why you could just be like, something ain't right. I don't know it yet, but something's not right about this, okay? And so emotionally aware people, though, they often become mentally exhausted because they're trying to reconcile the contradictions that person is given. Like they're trying to figure out like why this is not making sense, and it's like I'm like a make it make sense type of person. So you're mentally trying to make sense of all these inconsistencies, okay? You're trying to reconcile them, you're trying to get some clarity in things, you're trying to make sense of it, or you're trying to force emotionally inconsistent behavior to logically align with what your thought process is, even though you see that it's inconsistent. You're trying to make it align sometimes to what makes logical sense, and sometimes it won't because it's not the truth. Okay. And so, but let's talk about, if you are an empathetic, caring type of person, let's talk about why you could get stuck in a trap with all this. It's because empathetic people and caring people, they give the benefit of the doubt a lot. They're always looking for the logical explanation in things, or trying to avoid like unfair assumptions. Like you don't want them to be the bad person, so you give them the benefit of the doubt. And also you could be hoping for the inconsistencies that they will eventually make sense. What's not making make sense right now, you could be hoping that it will eventually make sense, okay? But one of the hardest healing lessons is that realizing that confusing communication is actually the clue. It's a big clue. Because if they are always being confusing and trying to keep you confused, that's a clue. There's something. It's like, let me check. Let me pay attention. Okay, because emotionally healthy communication, it doesn't even require you to constantly decode the code. You shouldn't have to do all those checks and balances and unlock this and unlock that and figure out this and figure out that. It should just be natural. Okay, it's not perfection, but you shouldn't have to undo all these locks mentally to try to get to the truth. Okay, now the thing is that also being emotionally aware, it does not always mean that the that you assume the worst. It does not always mean that you start being like paranoid about everybody because not everybody fits in this category. This is just for dishonest people, okay? Not everybody is dishonest. So don't be paranoid. Don't assume the worst about everybody. Also, don't accuse people impulsively, because just because it's that person doesn't mean it's this person, okay? And so healthy discernment, though, it still requires you to be observant. You observe. It still requires the facts, and it still, you still look at the patterns of over time, and of course healthy communication and grounded thinking. But just don't obsess about it or get paranoid or think everybody is dishonest, because everybody's not dishonest, okay? But emotionally aware people are often reacting typically to accumulated patterns, meaning it happens like it's more than one, it just keeps happening, okay? And that's the difference. So one of the most mentally exhausting experiences, though, is trying to make emotionally inconsistent behavior make logical sense. It's sometimes you just can't, because it's not logical, or they may not be logical. Okay, but their behavior may not be logical, so sometimes it just isn't, okay? And so and mentally, and sometimes like what happens is many emotionally aware people, they find peace when they stop over decoding, over explaining, over investigating, or trying to force honesty out of a dishonest person. Okay. And so instead, you could start saying stuff like, you know what, I'm just going to pay attention to the patterns. Because again, people can say one thing, but what are they showing you? So if you pay attention to the patterns, you'll be able to come up with the answer. Okay. And then remember, though, God's not the author of confusion. I say that in a lot of videos, because anytime there's confusion, just remember God's not the author of confusion. And sometimes, like your nervous system, it keeps reacting because something inside of you may recognize that, hey, this does not feel emotionally honest, emotionally safe, or emotionally congruent. Like this is just not going to work out because it's not safe. Okay. And that does not mean, though, to be, like I said, don't be paranoid about every single person. Just watch the patterns. Okay. And so it means, though, that you always want to protect your peace, always protect your clarity, and stop abandoning your observations just because somebody else minimizes them. Now, again, you don't have to do this all the time, all day, and things like that. It's just when somebody's not being honest, and you in your body, your nervous system is letting you know something's off. Just pay attention to the patterns. Okay. I hope this message helped you. As always, I'm wishing you peace, love, joy, and happiness. If this message touched you, make sure you thumbs up the message. And again, I'd be happy to have you in the family. If you are feeling the vibe, please go ahead and subscribe. All right. Have a great day. Bye.